Hello and welcome to another episode of Doctor's Cut-Ups. Today we're going to look at criterion number 5, economic systems. So an economic system by itself is different from a government system. A government system is when we look at a country, how a country makes, enforces, and interprets its laws. An economic system is this. It's a set of rules by which a nation decides how to produce and distribute its resources to satisfy its people's wants and needs. We see government right here in the word rules, because it's government that makes the rules and interprets and enforces the rules that does this thing. Now, just to review very quickly, I know you talked about this in economics, but we want to understand clearly what is a want, what is a need, and that it's goods and services that satisfies those. So an example of a need is nourishment, and pizza is an example of a good that would satisfy that need. Shelter is a need. One-bedroom apartment is a good that satisfies that need. Entertainment, some people would argue whether it's a need or a want, but we would all agree that Twin Seasons tickets would satisfy that particular want. Now, our first introduction to economic systems was with the tragedy of the commons. And when we looked at that, we originally had two goods. And we have two spectrums up here going from public to private. Our first good was sheep. And when we started the simulation, the sheep were privately owned. We owned them as individuals in our community. Then we had meadows. That was the other good. And when we started the simulation, the meadows we held in common, we owned them as a community. They were publicly owned. The tragedy, what happened is that by working to satisfy our self-interest, we raised more and more sheep, which eventually overgrazed the meadows. Our sheep would die. Our sheep represented wealth. We lose our wealth. We die. So how did we solve the solution? One solution was to make the sheep public. We called this the communist solution. All goods, both the sheep and the meadows, would be publicly owned. That would satisfy that. The other solution was to make the meadows privately owned. We called this the capitalist solution. And if I had my own individual land, it was now in my self-interest not to overgraze the meadows. Our third solution was the sheep remained private good and the meadows a public good. The tragedy was solved by putting a cap on the number of sheep any one individual could own. What happened to the wealth that the talented farmers were prevented from accruing? Well, if we had too much wealth, we took that from them and we redistributed it to those farmers that struggled to raise their sheep. Now, we called that the socialist or the moderate command solution. We can look at the same thing, the same tragedy on an interest spectrum. On one end, we had the group or the community's interest, which was to cap the wealth. On the other hand, we had the individual's interest, which was to raise more and more sheep. The sheep represented wealth. We'd get more and more wealthy with more and more sheep. Okay. In the tragedy of the commons, as we explained, the individual's self-interested goal was in direct opposition to the group or community's goal. In other words, the individual working to maximize his or her self-interest would lead to a collective tragedy. The tragedy is avoided by taking the group's interest and making it the same as the individual's. So we take the land, we make it a private good, and now it's in the individual's interest to not overgraze their land. Or if we eliminate the individual interest by making the sheep owned as a group, there is no more individual interest. When I labor, I receive no personal benefit from my labor. I receive no wealth. The wealth goes to the community, and then the community shares the wealth equally. That was the strong command solution. There was a third option. In the third option, the government works to promote individuals working in their self-interest. We let them basically make wealth for themselves, but actively seeks to equalize the wealth of the community by providing for the needs of those that cannot provide for themselves. Thus, the community's interests are served. We call this system socialism or a moderate command economy. The government's role in this solution is to provide substantive guarantees to its citizens, such as wealth, housing, health care, when the individual can't do it for him or herself. If in a socialist society it is the government's role to redistribute the wealth, what is the role of government in a capitalist society or in a communist society? Okay. How does our government here in the United States help the individual accrue wealth for him or herself? The role of government in a capitalist or a market economy is to provide procedural guarantees, fair rules, equal treatment under the law. There might be a few substantive guarantees, such as a public education, and that's kindergarten through 12th grade. How would a government in a communist society help the community accrue wealth? Complete substantive guarantees. The government would provide you with wealth, a house, a job, whether you can or cannot do this for yourself. Another way to look at this, probably more simple, is the ownership spectrum. So we just want to look at a country and see, are the majority goods privately owned or the majority of the goods publicly owned? So what economic system is in place in a society where the majority of the goods and services are private? Down here. That's going to be capitalism or the market economy. What system is it when the majority of the goods and services are publicly owned, provided by the government? We call that a strong command solution, strong command economy, or the communist solution. Where would we put socialism on the spectrum? Right smack in the middle, because there's a mixture of ownership. There's some public, there's some private. Okay, another thing we can do is look at how a nation answers the following basic economic questions. Which goods and services will be produced? How will these goods and services be produced? How will the goods and services be distributed? If we wanted to identify a country's economic system, you could look at the goods and services the government has made public or private. You can also look at whose interests the government supports. Finally, you can also look at how the government has chosen to answer the three basic economic questions. For example, which goods and services will be produced? What economic system would allow for the production of, wait for it, the Chia Pet? If you're unfamiliar with the Chia Pet, we got a ceramic animal that we then paint seeds on, we water it, and it grows fur. Very cool. You are correct. A capitalist, a market economy would allow for this. Because in a market economy, why? Individuals, businesses, and markets are answering this question. If I as an individual think I can make money, a profit, by making a ceramic doll that grows grass, I'm going to make it and sell it. If government answers this question, they're not going to choose to make a Chia Pet. They will be viewed as a want and an unnecessary for individuals to have. What economic system would allow for the production of an automobile? That's correct. All three would. But you ask yourself, how are automobiles different in a market economy versus in a communist society? So in our country, where we have a market economy, we have all different types of automobiles. We got 2 doors, 4 doors, we got trucks, we got sedans, we got convertibles, all different colors, makes, and models. In a communist society with a strong command economy, you might have a truck and you might have a car. There's not going to be as many makes and models. They're all going to look the same. They might even all be the same color. How will these goods and services be produced? That's another economic question. Now, food being a need in all of these economic systems, they will have to decide how to produce it. So we have our spectrum. So which economic system would have a technological solution? And which economic system would allow for a labor-intensive solution? Correct. The market is going to choose technology because it allows one person to produce more food, which means more wealth for that individual. Yes, the strong command economy, the communist solution, is going to probably select the labor-intensive solution because in addition to providing food, they need to provide jobs for people to do. Finally, our last question, how will these goods and services be distributed? So, in which economic system would allow for a drone to deliver packages to your house? Correct. If individuals, businesses, or the market are answering this question, they're going to use drones because, again, it reduces costs and allows them to get packages to you quicker and more efficiently, possibly for a cheaper price, making more profit for the individual or the company. So, that's just an introduction to economic systems. Once again, this is our definition, and we see that an economic system is a set of rules by which a nation decides how to produce and distribute resources to satisfy people's wants and needs. Government interjects itself in this definition in the word rules because it makes the rules, enforces the rules, and interprets the rules. All right, stay tuned for another edition of Doctor's Cut-Ups.